you would think that the United States Code, the federal statutes, if you put it on a bookshelf here, it would span the entire wall, 6 feet high, probably 30, 40 feet wide. Surely in those tens of thousands of pages, every activity has been clearly defined, right? Wrong. So it's the same exercise that we've got to do in all kinds of regulatory and legal contexts. I hear your point, I acknowledge it, and I think that is your point, is that we have to acknowledge we can't define it down to a granular level that would answer every question just by looking at the page. It's still going to require the exercise of quasi-judicial hearing information, considering the facts, making a determination, and explaining the determination. And I wish there was a way to get around that, but I don't think there is. So I appreciate your point, though.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Are there any other questions for our speaker? Yes, Mr. Harrington?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. One question as it relates to what appears to me a somewhat subjective term of developmentally appropriate or age appropriate. It seems as though that there's enough of science today about how early childhood's brains develop and their emotional development, that science could give us a definition for what's age appropriate at each grade level.
I think you're right that developing and evolving field of medical and scientific and cognitive and psychological study can certainly give us guidance, probably very helpful guidance. What makes it a little bit challenging is that field, like nearly every other field of medical or scientific endeavor, is one that's itself developing and evolving, growing and changing. And what we tried to do here is acknowledge that, account for it, and, to use the legal phrase, incorporate by reference those ideas and standards and guidelines without trying to articulate them fully and completely here on the page, because I just don't know if we can as a practical standpoint. But I do agree with your point, which is I think what this tries to accomplish, though perhaps necessarily imperfectly, is that those type of materials and subject matter experts can provide valuable guidance in determining what's developmentally appropriate for a 5-year-old versus a 10-year-old versus 15, and so on. Part of the unfortunate reality of regulatory drafting and legislative drafting is we probably can't definitively answer every one of those questions on the page. We've got to leave some room for the actual decision makers to apply the facts, to apply the guidance, the regulation to the law.
I don't think you need to split hairs, but I do think that, and since they're going to be in a school library and every student have access to that, I don't think in elementary school, for example, I think you can say what's appropriate for a child up to the 6th grade or 11, 12, whatever age that is. And it has to, whatever is not appropriate for a 6-year-old, if they're gonna have access to it, if it's appropriate for a 12-year-old, then we don't have good guidance and good instruction there. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not talking about trying to get the definition down to a science by age, but I think in categories of students under 12 years of age or under 10 years, whatever science says that is, where the undue imposition of personal bias and political opinions, the brain is just not ready to handle that could be a guideline that would be helpful, because I think you can get a lot of challenges of this, and it's all on the different interpretation of what age appropriate is.
A couple of thoughts in response. I think those are some good points you're making. First would be, keep in mind that this regulation applies more broadly than just to library books. It applies to other types of instructional materials too. And in other contexts outside of the library, it is, I think, much easier to segregate by age appropriateness, right? The books used in the sixth grade class
Curriculum,
should be
curriculum,
sixth grade appropriate, and kindergarten should be kindergarten. But you're right, that in the library, again, let's assume it's a elementary school, first through fifth, that any student who walks in there could get any one of those books. I say the following, I don't know if I should be, if I should be proud of my 7-year-old or a little bit embarrassed that he's a nerd like his dad. But he came home from the school library a couple of weeks ago, literally with a book entitled "The Duties and Responsibilities of the Secretary of Health and Human Services." What kind of 7-year-old checks that nonsense out? I don't know, but
7-year-old.
mine, yes, that's right, mine does. And I bring that up as an example. Is that a book that is academically appropriate for a second grader? It's probably a little bit above his pay grade right now. You know, maybe a fifth grader could read that and do a book report on it. But here's the point. In the library context, that sort of age appropriateness, right? We're talking about cognitive ability and developmental ability, distinct from what is always age and developmentally inappropriate. Material that under state law would be considered sexually graphic or obscene or pervasively vulgar. I think that's an important distinction to make, while realizing that, again, in the library context, you're going to have some books that are too advanced a reading level for the youngest readers. And I think that's okay. That's not the type of age and developmentally appropriateness, propriety, that the regulation is targeting. And I don't think that's the way it would or could be applied.
Well, I just applaud the effort to try to give some guidelines, because obviously there's some ambiguity out there in terms of understanding what's right and wrong. And I don't like the over-againstness that's developing, and some of the emails I've gotten from groups accusing me of being Hitler. I mean, people just don't like controls. And you're going to have a normal resistance to almost anything by a certain group of people.
And I'll just point out briefly, and I know y'all are tired of hearing me talk at this point, so I'll keep it quick. You will, and in fact, I know you already have, heard or will be accused of book banning. I get it. That's a convenient catchphrase that raises negative connotations in people's minds. And I'm not going to give you the full law review article on it here, but here's the 30-second summary that you need to remember. Book banning is when the government tries to use its coercive authority to stop you from buying, selling, owning, talking about, possessing, sharing, or reading a book. That's not what we're doing here. This regulation is talking about how the government spends its own money and shelf space and time to decide what materials to pick and put in front of people. That's not a book ban. Every kid in South Carolina is still absolutely free, assuming this regulation is promulgated and enacted, every kid in the state is still absolutely free to read whatever they want. They can go buy a book if they want to. They can check it out from the public library. They can order it from Amazon. They can talk about it with their friends. They can carry it in their backpack. We're not trying to ban any books. We're not banning any books. We're not stopping anybody on their own time from doing what they want, reading what they want. We're just saying, as a state agency, as a state political subdivision, as all of our public schools are, we're not going to use our money to do certain things. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Are there any other questions from our members? Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Coleman, for being here today. We appreciate
Thank
your
you.
presentation.
And I apologize to those of you who come at 1 o'clock. You might have to suffer through some of that same discussion all over again.
We will be prepared for that. Thank you. All right, to our committee members, we will now entertain a motion, and I know you provided clarity earlier, and thank you, Mr. Walters. This is just to move it to the full board meeting later today. So we'll entertain a motion for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move that we place Regulation 43-170 on the full meeting agenda for first reading this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. So we have a motion from Mr. Walters, a second from Ms. Frierson. Any discussion regarding that? All in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Okay, that will move to the full board agenda. We have no other business before our Policy and Legislative Committee today, so I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Do we have, okay, we have Mr. Walters, a motion to adjourn. If there is no concern regarding that, I declare this meeting adjourned.
Okay, so we get ready.
We'll start the next one with our license.